from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Hey, don't change that channel. Opposed to another football league in the CFL, it's never over until it's over. 3 teams are without a win, but certainly is one closer to getting on a roll. And are the undefeated Roughriders in a whole heap of trouble without Harris? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Hey, if you're a long-time listener, thanks for coming back. If you're a rookie, well, you found the #1 podcast for CFL conversation with the nation's top broadcasters, analysts, and columnists. Now, speaking of, let's introduce this week's crew. Certainly a long-time great friend of the podcast. He's an outstanding talent on TSN 1200, the voice of the Ottawa Redblacks, and Atletico Ottawa, AJ Jakubec. AJ, always a pleasure, partner.
Always a pleasure as well, Bubs.
Also, no stranger, he's informing and sometimes poking the bear for Winnipeg sports fans from the Free Press columnist Taylor Allen.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking some football. And like I said, off the air, it's going to be a little different than my last couple times on the show, talking about a winless Bombers team instead of a dominant Bombers team. So should be a little different this time out.
And it's time to sound that rookie alert. Ding, ding, ding. He's, but he knows a whole bunch about the CFL stuff. Likes to talk about a lot of American football as well, too. From the Markcast out of Seattle, Reid Johnson. Always a pleasure to meet you and have you on the podcast.
I appreciate you letting an American invade today. I had my birthday on July 1st, Canada Day. It's so nice that you guys deem my birthday so important that you throw a whole national holiday. So I appreciate it. But yes, we're here. It's been an exciting week.
All right, fellas, let's get right at it. Well, as it stands right now, 3 of 4 games were decided on the final play of the contest. Which finale thrilled you the most, Taylor?
Well, I got to stay in my lane here, Bubs. I got to go to McMahon Stadium in Calgary, Bombers Stampeders. Jake Maier, 0-5 against Winnipeg all time. The Bombers, 0-3, desperate for a win. Zach Collaros takes a shot to the ribs, leaves just after half. Chris Streveler, the folk hero of the whole city, comes in the game and kind of leads them to a late comeback a little bit, ties the game, goes to OT, and then he throws an interception to none other than Demario Houston, the former Bomber of all people. And then the Stamps kick a 52-yard field goal to win the game. Bomber Nation in shambles right now. This is uncharted territory for them. So it was an interesting Canada Day. You know, it was dark and gloomy and rainy all day yesterday, which is rather fitting because I think a lot of blue and gold faithful are down in the dumps after that one. So yeah, for me, there was such a great weekend of football, but that's the one that kind of stands out just because it feels so different for people in Winnipeg after 4 very strong seasons, obviously.
Reid, which one caught your attention?
Oh, I really thought BC was going to blow it. That's kind of my life right now, and I understand that we have, sights set on hosting Grey Cups and all that stuff. I don't know. I've lived through this and the Rick Campbells of the world, and I don't know. I'd like to take a shock paddle to him in the locker room and kind of get the boys feel like they get excited up. But it was good. It was exciting. We had a lot of walk-off field goals. But yeah, I thought BC was going to blow it against Edmonton. Edmonton's getting to the point. Obviously, you don't want to be the one to drop the loss to them, especially at home and following the 50 cent of it all and everything else. But no, it was exciting. The overtime, we had Dustin Nielsen on it. Right, they put on us going through. It was exciting. That was exciting. It was a good weekend. It was a great weekend. Same for Montreal. And that was left a little to be desired for Toronto stepping up. But hey, if you're a Cody Fajardo stance, you're looking good right now.
AJ, I guess I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, well, I have to. And I think the big thing is, from an Ottawa Redblacks perspective, these were the games they were losing last season. They weren't fantastic in that game against the Ticats, but last year they were finding ways to lose. And, so far, in the 3 games this year, they found a couple of ways to win. And the game against Montreal wasn't close. So pretty dramatic, especially the way it looked so much like so many of the games last year where some controversial calls and just missed opportunities. For example, DeAndre Lamont on that last Hamilton drive with an opportunity to end it, but couldn't reel in the interception. And you kind of think, okay, well, here we go again. There's not a lot of time, but just little different things. Like there was a game last year against Montreal where Bob Dice didn't call the timeout in the last minute when the Alouettes were driving, and he called the timeout that gave them a little more time on the clock, and they made every second count before that Lewis Ward field goal. So, yeah, of course, I'm going with I don't get an opportunity to call a lot of game-winning field goals over the course of the last few years, game-winning anything. But yeah, it was big for this team, but also big, I think, for the fans as well, because they only had over 20,000. It was usually 18 or 19, so not too far off last year, but they only had over 20,000 once last year. They sold over 2,000 tickets in the last 24 hours because the first game, combination of Stanley Cup final was on, probably a little hangover from last year. What is this team going to be? But also the weather. Of course, we had the lightning delay against Winnipeg. Those are some big factors in, a pretty poor crowd to start the season of just over 16,000. But with the weather being good, with Big Rec playing at halftime and also before the game, and that opening day win as well, a little more optimism. This will give them more reasons to come out as the summer progresses and it ends. And maybe this wasn't a narrative for them, but 10 straight losses to Hamilton, 14 straight losses against the East, and incredibly 18 straight home losses against the East. They hadn't won a game against an Eastern opponent since the 2018 East Final. That's ages ago. So just to have those streaks and now because and Edmonton's the same way. Ottawa and Edmonton for the last few years have been dealing with these home streaks and just losing streaks that just seem to go on forever. Ottawa ended their home streak last year, but they still had these streaks, and now it feels like, okay, all that is on the back burner. They can just focus on football on this year, and so far, 2-1 start.
Yeah, it was something like what I think TSN had charted it down at like 2,051 days since Hamilton had lost, I guess, in that 2018 playoff game to the Ottawa Redblacks. And, Taylor, I'll tell you, I mean, you compare the two leagues, and I don't like to do too much. They are different games. But if you look at Bo Levi Mitchell, 9 plays, 61-yard drive, gets a touchdown with 28 seconds left. Like in the NFL, like for this entire week, we're talking about Bo Levi Mitchell, like in the Tom Brady sense of leading his team back and, getting a touchdown with 28 seconds left, that big drive. And here we are in the Canadian Football League, just enough time for Ottawa to do something and end up kicking a game-winning field goal. I think that's one of the crazy things about our game.
Sorry, it froze for like the last 10 seconds. Can you repeat the last?
Yeah, I'm just saying that's the crazy.
Very sorry.
It's a crazy thing about our game, like that. These kind of things can happen.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's so many people, even in Canada, and it's so sad who knock the CFL and whatever. But like, really, you sit down and you watch a full weekend of CFL football. It is by far the most entertaining product around out of any pro league. And maybe Reid might disagree. I don't know, from down south. But, I mean, people are sometimes harsh on the Canadian game. And it's sad because, I mean, the 3 downs, the bigger field, it really is an exciting product. And I wish more people, up here in Canada really embraced it and really celebrated it. Because, yeah, maybe there isn't the super duper stars that the NFL has, like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce too. But I mean, the CFL, man, it's a beautiful game, and I'm so glad on Canada Day weekend of all weekends, we were spoiled with so many good games and reminders as to what makes it so great.
Reid, I guess a lot of the followers for your Markcast would start to realize that about this game, that it's never over till it's over.
Well, yeah, a couple things. It was wild because I was catching up on the game, and I can't keep track of all these losing streaks, right? Like Edmonton hadn't won at home forever, and Ottawa had but you would have thought the Berlin Wall went down. I mean, the streak is over. I mean, I was watching the CFL recap yesterday, getting ready for our show. Very excited, but really glad for Ottawa with that. But it's a weird, I will say Canadians have a little bit of inferiority sometimes when it comes to the game and protecting, but it is great. And our listeners, because we do a lot of spring football, the CFL game, in my opinion, is a step above kind of what our viewers are used to watching, right? If you're game to watch, the Maulers play in the USFL or whatever against the Stallions, you're watching the CFL, it's much higher. It's much more exciting, right? So I feel like our listeners kind of get used to whatever standard, and the CFL is going to be above that, of course, because it's just a minor step down from the NFL. But it is, it's interesting there, and the protectiveness, and it's great. They were great games. They're exciting. I don't love, we can talk the Montreal punt rules and kind of all that stuff. I don't love all the little nuances, but no, I think it's exciting, and I think a lot of our listeners have made that transition over.
AJ, be honest, when Bo Levi Mitchell hit Shamar Bridges in the end zone, were you saying, here we go again?
Well, I knew they had time. So, I mean, in my mind, I was saying to myself, seen this movie before, but again, the fact that they had 28 seconds, it's an eternity in the Canadian Football League, and I knew they had time, and they had two returners, like Tobias Harris returned one for a touchdown last year when Devontae Dedmon was hurt. And Dedmon is back to being, in my opinion, maybe the most electrifying player in the Canadian Football League. He's got the best return to game ratio in the history of the league. So when they're kicking away from Devontae Dedmon and you still have somebody on the other side that showed he can take one to the house as well, you knew that the possibility existed that they could get real good field position. That's exactly what they got, and they made it count. I do want to make, and I think Reid will appreciate this. I'm not a big Canadian football is so much better than American football guy. Like I just like football, and that's the way I've been for 40 years. I was lucky enough to watch the greatest dynasty. I mean, when I grew up and I'm 6-7 years old in 81 and 82, I was watching the greatest dynasty growing up in Edmonton and Warren Moon and then Eskimos win the tail end of their 5 straight Grey Cups. So, the CFL has always been a big part of what I've been about, but also always loved American football as well. And I wish we'd kind of get beyond that narrative and just say, this is football. It's great football. The NFL is great. CFL is great. You don't have to choose. You don't have to say which one's better. It's a great product. And we're lucky to have the second best football league in the world here in the Canadian Football League. And in some ways it can be more entertaining with the return rules, with the 3-minute rule and the clock, the way it is down the stretch, and how you can have lead changes and everything like that. But I don't think it's a good idea to just pin one league against the other league, because if you're a hardcore NFL fan and you want to convert that fan to being a CFL fan, it's not about crapping on the NFL. It's not about crapping on U.S. football. It's about promoting how great this football is. And
no doubt,
that's the way I view it. And that's just my point of view.
All right, let's go to topic number 2, right back to your Reid. Not a couple. There are a trio of 0-4 teams that, for whatever reason, some of them have been close, some of them have been not so close. But is there a team that you could see emerging out of that 0-4 and maybe even getting on a run? To you.
So I asked this because I got the notes prepped, and I asked my co-host Jason Hussey. I said I'm going to steal his homework on this one, what he thought. We think Hamilton's really good, right? And obviously Bo looks like Bo again, a lot of completions that, last year, obviously the injuries and kind of all that stuff. I'm with Hamilton on that. I think I'm pretty down on the McLeod Bethel Thompson thing. A friend of the show, he's been on, and we're a fan of him and all his work and everything. But to me, the Chris Jones, this whole experiment, and you're spending the money on McLeod, and we got Trey Ford sitting there, the nicest gentleman in the world. I don't really understand the whole dynamics of that. I think there's some sort of I don't know if Chris, if Trey Ford spit in, Chris Jones' soup or something one day. Like, there just seems to be a weird kind of personality divide there. I'm friends, I'm game of Hamilton. I think Winnipeg, as we talked about, and even Taylor kind of off air before we got on, what a time to be alive if you're a CFL West Division fan. Really exciting. I've never lived through this as covering the CFL, having Winnipeg be as terrible as they are. But I don't know. I mean, Lucky Whitehead, right? Is he going to come in? Is that going to change? Because I have all the, we're the new CFL, because I have all the, BC started 0-5 and they won the Grey Cup. Like, okay, I mean, they could be, and maybe, I don't know, Taylor, do you think is Lucky coming in? Is that going to jumpstart that franchise at this point? I don't know what's going on, but I would be curious your thoughts.
I mean, I think there's probably a reason why he wasn't in the league. I mean, he's 32. He's kind of battled some injuries these past couple of years. Last year or two, didn't really look like as explosive as he used to be, obviously. And then you sign the guy 4 weeks into the season. And I asked Mike Voltis actually last week. I said, "Are you guys going to bring in a veteran? There's guys out there. There's guys like I even said there's guys like Lucky Whitehead out there looking for work. Would you bring in a guy like that?" And he said, "Well, we could, but then, by the time you get that guy up to speed, by the time he's comfortable working with your quarterbacks, it's going to be a couple of weeks. So then before you know it, the season's like halfway done," was basically what he said. But sure enough, then they end up signing Lucky anyways a couple of days later. So he can't hurt, because right now this is the worst receiving corps in the league by far. I mean, which is insane to say, because at the beginning of the year, they were by far the best. They have three of the top four highest paid receivers in the league, and two of them are out. Dalton Schoen, done for the year. Kenny Lawler, broken arm, and who knows when he'll be back and if he can be the same, coming off of such a big injury like that. So they are decimated at receiver, and I think Lucky Whitehead definitely can't hurt, but I don't think he's going to be the savior for their offense by any means.
Sorry, Taylor, just a question there. Is Schoen the year? I thought he was on the 6th game. Is he done for the year?
He's done for the year. Yeah, they've been. Wow. I mean, the Bombers always very hush about all injuries and stuff. But yeah, it's a torn ACL. He is done for the year. So that's a massive blow, obviously.
Well, and just to jump, I mean, Lucky, even last year with BC, wasn't lighting the world on fire, and obviously they had the deeper receiving last year in BC, but and so, like, to me, that obviously there was a reason BC didn't, and I love Lucky. I mean, we were, when he was highest paid receiver, right, 2 years ago, or was part of that until I think Kenny got, with Edmonton got paid over him, but it was like he was lighting the world on fire, but like you said, can't hurt at this point. I mean, if I saw Zach Carleros, lying on the ground, kind of with his eyes closed, I'm like, brother, I know how you feel right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because when I look at the 9 teams in the league, there's been 11 games decided by one score. And of the 5 decided by more than one score, there's one common denominator, and that's the Montreal Alouettes. So they've won 3 of the games by blowout scores, and there's been 2 other games decided by more than one score. One of those was by 9 points, and the other was Saskatchewan beating Hamilton. So what that tells me is Montreal, and I saw this after the first couple of weeks, Montreal is the class of the league. Like, there's a huge gap to me right now between 1 and 2 in the Canadian Football League. I think the gap between 1 and 2 is bigger than the gap between 2 and 9. So I think all 3 teams are in a position where this seems like a year where one of those teams at 0-4 is going to find a way to get themselves back into the mix and probably make a playoff spot. And I think all 3 are capable for different reasons. If I'm picking one, I'll pick Edmonton, because I do think they've got the Trey Ford factor. They've got something to use if they need to use it, and they've been close even against a team like Montreal, for example. So it feels like they're ready to break through, but I've also seen it the other way, where when you continually lose these close games, just because you're close, you need to be able to show that you can finish one of those games. Otherwise, it just tends to snowball, and there's eventually a lack of belief starts to filter through the squad when you get to those close moments. So I'll say Edmonton, but I don't want to write off Winnipeg, because even though offensively they've been really challenged and clearly some major injuries have played a factor there, I just feel like with a team that's been to 4 straight Grey Cups, I don't think I can write a team like that off with, the Colaroses and the Big Hills and the Dembskis and the Oliveras and the Jeffersons. There's too many good players to write them off at this stage. But I think what happened last year to me with Winnipeg was it felt like they lost their invincibility. And that's a big thing, because there's always 2 teams playing. And for those previous 3 years, there was a sense with other teams going into Winnipeg that, oh, here we go again. This is going to be a long night. And I don't feel like that was there last year. And now with them 0-4, they've lost that invincibility. And I think that's really hurt as well. So we'll see. It's early, and there's a lot of football to be played, because if you're writing all three off, you're saying teams like Ottawa and Calgary and Saskatchewan, and I'm not ready to anoint those teams playoff teams just yet, are absolutely in. It's way too early for that. So a lot of time in the CFL. Let's remember, never mind BC at 0-5 winning the Grey Cup. How about Montreal at 0-9 making the playoffs back in 2014? So that's how this league can be. 0-4 is not going to be crippling, but it's crunch time in the next 2 to 3 weeks for sure for Winnipeg, Hamilton, and Edmonton.
Last thing to you on this question here, Taylor, and AJ brings up a good word that is interesting to me, and that's this invincibility about, especially going into, I guess, what is Princess Auto Stadium now, whatever they're calling it now. Is there something to that? Yes, there's no doubt the Bombers they're banged up. There's no doubt about that. But is there, because it's true. Even as a broadcaster on a Ticats audio network, when the Ticats went in or started a season in Winnipeg, I'd be like, whoa, boy, this could be interesting. Do you think that invincibility has disappeared?
100%. These past couple of years, it almost didn't even matter what the score was at halftime when the Bombers were playing at home. It's like, they're going to figure it out, and they're going to win this game. Didn't matter if they were down 2 scores. Didn't matter how many times they turn over the ball. Did not matter. No one in the press box, no one in the stands thought the Bombers were going to lose. And 9.9 times out of 10, they came back and they'd win the game, or they'd figure it out. But now that confidence and that invincibility it really is gone. And there were signs that this was kind of going to be the year where they fell off the cliff a little bit. You look at the offseason that they had. They lost some very, very important players. Jamarcus Hardrick, star right tackle. Jackson Jeffcoat, one of their star pass rushers. Rasheed Bailey, really reliable receiver. Demario Houston, one of the best ball hawks in the league. Jeff Gray, really strong Canadian interior lineman. Janarian Grant, the greatest kick returner in franchise history. They lost all these guys. They couldn't afford to pay everyone. That's how pro sports works. That's nothing new. But the guys that they replaced them with were also these inexperienced guys, and most of the guys that they put in at those spots just haven't really done anything, really, except for maybe 1 or 2. So you lose all those guys, plus you factor in all the injuries, and it's not an excuse, but when you lose arguably the top 2 receivers in the league, Dalton Schoen and Kenny Lawler, like we mentioned earlier, that's not going to be a recipe for success. And then Brady Oliveira, last year's MOP finalist, missed all of training camp, didn't look great in week 1, missed week 2, and now week 3, week 4, teams are stacking the box against him. He's not really getting much more workload. He only had 10 carries for 26 yards against Calgary. That's not the Brady that we saw last year, right? And then you factor in also the fact that this team is just another year older for a year. These past couple of years, we've been asking this team every year, like, well, you guys are getting kind of old. I don't know. Can you keep playing at the same level? But it's starting to look like maybe not. Maybe some of these guys really are kind of no longer in their prime. Zach Claris, again, I know there's been so many injuries and shakeups on the O-line and whatever, but he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in 3.5 games. He's 7th. I believe nuts. He's 7th in the league right now in passing yards.
Nuts.
He has not looked like himself. It is, yeah, absolutely. It's nuts. And then Willie Jefferson, right? If you really watch a game, really just focus on him, he hasn't really looked like himself so far this year. Adam Bighill, he's not getting any younger. He had a big injury last year. He started this year hurt as well. Patty Neufeld, Stanley Bryan, like lots of these guys are like mid to late 30s, and I think, or more so mid 30s. And I think Father Time is finally catching up to this team. So to kind of answer your original question about which 0-4 team has the best shot at kind of bouncing back, you won't find me in Winnipeg's camp standing up for them saying, hey, this team's going to bounce back and they're going to figure it out. Don't you worry. Because honestly, I'm not so sure that they will. Will they steal the final playoff spot? Sure, probably. Could they maybe steal a playoff game just because of their experience and they've been there, done that? Yeah, maybe. But I do not see this team totally figuring out and making it to a 5th straight Grey Cup. I would be shocked.
AJ, word out of Calgary and some of the people I've been talking to is that there's an air of confidence about Jake Maier. right? And we haven't heard those words, or at least that name and those words kind of put together for a couple of years, ever since Bo Levi Mitchell ended up in Hamilton. Do you see a different Jake Maier? Could he possibly be the most improved player of the league from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, too early for me to say, but he's been excellent. I never really gave up on Jake Maier. I felt last year, it's difficult when you go from, and Ottawa's seeing this right now with Drew Brown, and Brown has had some ups and downs in 3 games, but leading his team to 2 victories, I think that's most important. But there is a difference between starting a handful of games when the guy is not there, as we saw with Drew Brown last year in Winnipeg, as we saw with Jake Maier before that in Calgary, and actually being the guy. When you're the number 1 starter and you're kind of the de facto captain of the offense and essentially of the team, it's a big change. And so he got to experience some of those ups and downs last year, found a way to get that Calgary team into the playoffs. Not the greatest record for sure, but they got in. And I think that would have been a big confidence boost for him and the organization, just finding a way. And I think a lot of teams, or not teams, but a lot of people around the league seem to be writing Calgary off. As long as Dave Dickinson is there and it's still the Calgary Stampeders, I went into this season thinking, you know what? Teams like Edmonton and Saskatchewan and Ottawa had some proving to do for me. And all 3 have been better, even though the Elks haven't won a game yet. But, Calgary, they just seem to find a way to get into the playoffs. And they always just seem to have ready-made talent that is ready to go, even if they've got newcomers. And kind of like Winnipeg right now, Calgary for years – just getting decimated with each offseason. Ottawa went through that as well after 2018, because when you've got really good players and really good teams, it seems like every other team around the league is trying to poach some of your players, not just to bring in the talent, but to bring in someone who's been part of that winning culture. And so Calgary's, I think, been able to navigate that okay. And I think, Jake Maier's looked excellent. He certainly looks like he's taken a step from last year. But for me, I never really gave up on him, because I always thought this was a guy that had the potential to be real good in this league.
Reid, you're shaking your head. I mean, and it's funny. I look at Jake, and, he's been kind of characterized as a kind of a check down Charlie, but he's definitely trying to push the ball down the field a little bit more this season.
Yeah, no, and I'm agreeing. I'm also, there's like the sun now is breaking through the trees here, blinding me. But I agree with AJ. I'm a Jake fan, right? We came into this late, missed kind of the whole Bo Levi on top of the world kind of era. And I had said, was it 2 years ago? I said, I want to I want to hitch my wagon to Jake Maier. I want to be a fan of him. Came on the show, really just, salt to the earth guy. Really like that. I don't know. I think it takes time, right? We've had Naylor on a bunch, and he talks, well, it takes 3-4 years to really be, move in to be a CFL quarterback and kind of learn through that. I mean, it's good to see him not throwing 57 attempts for like 100 yards or whatever it was the last couple seasons. So I like that. It seems like Calgary is really pushing the ball down the field. Calgary, to me, looks great right now. I mean, to me, they really put up a fight against BC in the home opener. You talked, Calgary made the playoffs last year, kind of limped in, and I don't know what that, to make the playoffs in a 9-team league when 6 teams make the playoffs isn't necessarily, what I would hang my hat on is like a lifetime, achievement. But that was exciting that happened. But no, I think Calgary looks great right now. It seems like I said they're trusting Jake more to try to move the ball that way, and running and defense. To me, they really put a struggle against BC, and really seems like they're playing physical. So I like that. I'm a big. If Winnipeg's going down now, if that's got to be the team that we face against with BC, that would be fine. But yeah, I think Calgary looks really good.
Taylor, are you impressed with what you see?
I am. I think it's important to note that you look at lots of the kind of the best quarterbacks in the CFL. Lots of them have been through a lot of adversity where they've had down years where people have written them off. Look at Zach Collaros. Look at Vernon Adams. Look at Trevor Harris. Look at Cody Fajardo. That's a perfect example where these guys, they've had seasons where they're on the top of the world, up here. And then they've had years where people think they're done, they're tossed to the scrap heap and, discarded by their team and whatever. So Jake Mayer, I'm glad Calgary's kind of been a little more patient with him, and they kind of have to be because they're paying him pretty big money. But yeah, this season it does look like we're kind of seeing the best side of them, because last year, I mean, just overall across the board, nothing was working in Calgary. They had injuries, they had some roster turnover and stuff, and it was just a mess. So Jake didn't have the best hand to work with. But this year, they got a little more talent, and he's playing decently well. I mean, he didn't have a great game against Winnipeg on the weekend. I think he completed 28 to 43 passes for 239 yards for them. So it wasn't an amazing game, but I mean, I think for him though, I mean, he got Godzilla off his back finally after never beating the Bombers. He can finally say he has. So I'm sure he's feeling a lot better moving forward. And they're 2-1. They're looking good. So yeah, I think it's too early to anoint him the most improved player, but I think he's a player who will definitely be in that conversation at the end of the season.
AJ, I want to go with this next question with you because you have such familiarity with him. The Riders have placed Trevor Harris on the 6-game injured list with, unfortunately, a knee injury. Now, Harris, do you feel like he's maybe with the Riders the most valuable player to his team? And after getting off to that 3-0 start, that there could be some challenges?
Well, he's looked great this year. So, yeah, I think there's no doubt he's their most important player. And, it's unfortunate to see, given the injury that he suffered last year to end his season. So we'll see. And that's why I'm not – and Saskatchewan, kind of like Ottawa, they're 3-0 and Ottawa's 2-1, but there's a lot to clean up there, whether it's penalties, whether it's for the Redblacks, for example, they've had some bad drops at times. There's been different things that you look at where you say, okay, it's a win. That's great. You found a way to win. You were losing these games last year, but it's not pretty, and you better start getting better week in, week out, or other teams are going to catch you. And that's kind of how I view Saskatchewan, watching them the first few weeks of the season, and losing Trevor Harris clearly isn't ideal at this stage, but they've got that cushion. They got that 3-0 start. Hopefully he's back to full health sooner rather than later, because I think it's always good when you've got a competitive Saskatchewan. Their fan base is annoying. They kind of drive interest with the other 8 teams around the league, telling everybody how great they are and how they're the only fans that matter in the league and the only fans that go to Mexico and wear green shirts and all that. And it's good when they're relevant, because they haven't been relevant the last couple of years. And well, I've kind of enjoyed a little bit of it because I do like, I'm an Alberta guy and I lived in Saskatchewan for 4 months and I do love it there. I love going to Regina. It's just funny when they overreact to certain things one way or the other. So yeah, no, I think it's great for the league, and we'll see how it plays out from here. But yeah, you never want to see top players go down. You don't never want to see anyone go down, and hopefully Trevor's able to get healthy and back into that Riders lineup sooner rather than later.
All right, Reid, do you believe in Shea Patterson?
Yeah. Well, so you want Saskatchewan to be good, because I don't know what you do in Regina if you're not watching the Roughriders, right? So you need them to be good. Yeah, we were there for the Grey Cup. That was fun. What a surprise! Yeah, that Trevor Harris, 38 years old, that's older than I am. That is 2 months older. We share the same birth year. Out potentially, 6 games here, like. He's 38 years old. Like, why is he playing football? I mean, this is insane. We saw this last year. I don't know. Shea Patterson, number 1 draft pick in the USFL 2022 with the Michigan Panthers, did not play well in the USFL, has not been up in the CFL for a couple years, and has continued not to play well. We had Darren Bombing on this week, or I guess it was last week, talking obviously with Bonfire Sports and all of that. Darren said that Shea was the best backup quarterback in the CFL. I almost spit my water over my laptop. No, I don't think Shea Patterson is the future, and I don't think that that's why you build a franchise around a 38-year-old Trevor Harris. I think it's a disaster. Corey Mace, it seems great. I mean, it was the greatest hire in the history of the CFL, I think, when they announced that, right? And they had every single person, and Corey's the greatest guy. But no, I think that this is a mistake, and I don't see Shea Patterson playing well for them now.
To you, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, we only saw kind of a glimpse of Shea in that Hamilton game when Trevor went down. He went 4 for 10 for 40-something yards, I believe. So that wasn't exactly didn't exactly jump off the page, but he did say after the game,
He was
I played
horrible.
nowhere near my expectations. It was a weird situation to be thrown into and whatever. But I find it interesting, though, that Saskatchewan would not have brought in a veteran quarterback in the offseason. Just knowing Trevor's injury history, what happened last year, and again, that the fact that he's 38 years old, you kind of think like, okay, maybe we should have an experienced number 2 because there's a good chance we're going to need him at some point. So to roll in the season, with a guy like Shea Patterson, who does have, a pretty impressive resume, as Reid alluded to, and he's been in the CFL a little bit before and whatnot, so who knows, maybe he is a strong number 2, but what Darren Bombing said, Reid, oh my goodness, I'm going to see him in a couple hours of Bombers practice today. I'm going to give him heck over that one because I don't know why on earth you would say that with such a small sample size of Shea Patterson, but who knows, maybe in a week or two, if Shea's lighting it up, then Darren Bombing can throw it all in her face how Shea Patterson really is the best number 2, but I think I'm with you on that one, Reid. I'd be kind of surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, can we get Brian Scott? Can we ship him over from the Argos while we're at it? I mean, Jesus. I mean, at least he can throw a touchdown when he came in relief there at the end of that game.
Well, AJ, I mean, I hate to be Johnny Trade Boy. You guys got a lot of quarterbacks with the Redblacks. Like, maybe there's a deal to be made. I'm actually surprised that they didn't keep Mason Fine. I thought he was probably the better option than Shea Patterson, but that's their business. But AJ, there's a wealth of quarterbacks. I mean, where's Masoli in this mix with the Redblacks at this point?
So I'm in the press box the other night, so he's around. I don't really know his timeline, and I can't imagine Ottawa trading one of their 3 quarterbacks right now because the 4th is Jeremiah Masoli. They don't have anybody else in camp. There's no one on the practice roster. Tyree Adams just got back from injury to be the number 3 quarterback. He's looked good, taking reps with the scout team at practice. And of course, you got Dustin Crum as the backup. So I like Ottawa's quarterback situation depth-wise, but I can't imagine they would even entertain that because there's a reason they went through this. They've just lost so many quarterbacks the last few years, and depth has been a problem. So I can't imagine early in the season. Maybe when Masoli gets back and he's ready to go, then you would maybe entertain moving one of them. But as long as the only 3 guys on the roster are the 3 guys that are here, I can't imagine any type of deal that the Redblacks would make at quarterback.
Well, Reid, I mean, I would say the Riders' defense, they've been pretty strong. And again, I've seen them twice here against the Tiger Cats, and though at times somewhat undisciplined, and I think that's kind of these penalties seem to be an issue in a lot of places, in a lot of centers in this CFL. But maybe they can ride out their defense. As you said, Corey Mace, defensive kind of guy. Maybe they're going to just put it into the hands of their defense and just be conservative on offense.
I was looking here, Mazzoli is going to be 37 in August. So, I mean, it's not like we're necessarily trading one for the other. I just, like you said, well, at least they had Mason Fine. Mason Fine was the savior. Mason Fine, the last 2 seasons, that was the guy that was going to come out. It's wild to me. And you had Dolagala there. Now he's with BC, and that doesn't make sense because he doesn't run short yardage. And Brendan Adams is going to get killed. I don't understand Saskatchewan. I don't understand any of this at all. And I think, like you said, a hot start, and Trevor was looking good, but like Taylor said, it was never sustainable to have this go. I mean, that's all anyone's ever said in the CFL is you need to have 2 quarterbacks to make it through. And so to me, it's wild. Yeah, their defense, and they play up in Corey Mace, but this was just a terrible game plan going in. So I'm not surprised that this is not working out.
Roughriders will host the Argonauts. Redblacks, a second chance, or at least a second meeting against the Blue Bombers. Stampeders and Alouettes, big test for Calgary. And then the Lions travel east to Hamilton. Taylor Allen, the game of the week is?
The game of the week isn't happening in Winnipeg. I'll tell you that. But I think I'm actually really excited to kind of just jumping back to your last question. I'm actually really excited to see what Shea Patterson could do, but also what the Roughriders can do against a team who's actually won a game this year. Yes, Saskatchewan's looked dominant. Yes, they're 3-0 and whatever, but they've beat Hamilton twice, and they beat Edmonton, right? They haven't beat, at least an early contender in the league. So Toronto, despite everything that's going on over there, Cameron Dukes is looking really good. He's been a real surprise, I think, for a lot of people this year. So I'm actually really excited to see what Saskatchewan can do with their number 2 quarterback and against, one of the best teams in the league instead of beating up on a Hamilton or an Edmonton.
AJ?
I am going to vote Ottawa at Winnipeg, and it has nothing to do with Ottawa. I just find it fascinating, and we've clearly talked about this before, that you've got essentially, I don't want to call them a dynasty, but a bit of a mini dynasty getting to 4 straight Grey Cups, and they're 0-4, and kind of feel like they need this win. They're desperate for this win, and if they lose 2 games to Ottawa, who's still trying to figure things out early in the season, that would be a very bad sign. So for me, the most intriguing game of the week in the Canadian Football League is that Ottawa-Winnipeg game, just to see what the Bombers are going to look like.
Well, AJ, if the Redblacks are going to win this game, why will they beat the Blue Bombers?
I think because their offense is going to get better. I think, look, Winnipeg's offense hasn't been a world beater. It's the only offense not producing 20 points a game. But I feel like for the Redblacks to win this game, they just need to figure out a couple more things offensively. They haven't turned the ball over a ton. Now, they did a couple of times in that game against Hamilton and got away with it. But they've just been a little bit off with completions. It feels like, the batted down balls at the line of scrimmage, that's going to happen, especially when you got a smaller quarterback in Drew Brown. But sometimes you've got receiver and quarterback that just haven't been on the same page, and maybe the ball is a little bit behind the receiver because the receiver is supposed to be in a different spot. So, I'm curious to see if they get a little bit more on the same page, because they've got the makings of a really good offense here in Ottawa, but we haven't seen it click fully yet. I feel like if they're going to win in Winnipeg this week, they need that to click a little bit more.
Reid, the neat thing about this Ottawa and Winnipeg game to me is that it's the game where Ottawa has an opportunity to say, hey, look, we're legit. Even regardless of what the Bombers are going through, the Bombers have the name, they've got the quarterback, their MOP Grey Cup status. And, I'll be honest, in game number 1, after that, what was it, an hour-long rainstorm in the nation's capital, and the game got, we're wondering if it's going to get called. And then all of a sudden they come back on the field, and I fully expected the Bombers to win that game. I believe, AJ, with about 2 minutes left in the game?
Yeah, just over 2.
Yeah, just over 2 minutes.
And probably, Bubs, you fully expected Ottawa to lose that game as well, right?
That's where I'm going. That's exactly what I'm saying. I fully expected that Winnipeg were going to march down the field, Reid, but it didn't happen. Ottawa stepped up. What are you expecting out of this contest?
Well, yeah, so I'm looking here, and because I'm trying to do the prep, and I have answers for all of these, but let me touch on So the Blue Bomber thing, I agree with Taylor. It is this weird, morbid curiosity, right, of how bad can Winnipeg be at this point, right? And if Ottawa does it again, I totally agree with you. Thinking that Winnipeg was going to come back, it was kind of like when with the trade forward last year, and it was his start, right? They were up, whatever, and Winnipeg came battle back in the second half. You never expected them to lose that game. It would be great. It would be a huge selling point for Ottawa going to not IG Field anymore, whatever, Princess Automotive, to do that. I would be excited. Like I said, how low can that go? I think that's the storyline everyone's tracking. My own personal excited for America's CFL team, the BC Lions. This is the Markcast game. They're going into Hamilton to play Jason Hussey's, Ticats. I think that will be exciting. To me, the Stampeders, I would like to see what they look like against a good team like the Alouettes. We've talked on here, Calgary has looked really good so far. Mixed opponents who they've played. So, to me, we've talked about this, and I agree with AJ that the Alouettes, number 1 by a mile here in the CFL. So I want to see what that looks like. And then I think we might see a homicide in Regina here with Shea Patterson behind the Saskatchewan offensive line against the Argonauts. So I think for that, if you want to watch a train wreck or whatever, that might be, I don't know what the TV ratings are in the CFL, but that might be something that you would need to put, TV 14 or whatever. No children watching that one.
Reid, the thing about the Ticats and Lions that interests me is that over the years, regardless of how good the BC Lions are, they don't seem to travel east very well. They've struggled over the years against Montreal. They never get in and out of Ottawa with an easy win. And I've seen them lose numerous times in Hamilton. And if Hamilton's motivated, which I do believe they are, because they feel like not that they've been ripped off, they've kind of ripped themselves off a little bit. I'm expecting a real slugfest with Vernon Adams and maybe we've seen Vernon turn the ball over a little bit, and Tiger Cat fans and that defense they're always strong at home.
Well, in BC BC has no sort of like. I don't know if it's playing down. Seattle sports fans, we always play down our opponents, right? In BC, it was last year near the end of the season, like Hamilton comes in and wins at BC plays. Like there's just games, if you're BC, you want to host a Grey Cup, you want to be dominant here in the West. Winnipeg's fallen off, right? This is your opportunity to get as much ground as you can. Yeah, I totally, like, it's not like a sleepwalk, but they just don't always get up for all the games. So that's why I said at the top, like, I want to shake Rick Campbell or just kind of get a little bit of like fire out of him. I watch all the post-game press conferences with Rick, and it's like, well, like we won. We still need to put some stuff together. Like when we find, I want some sort of urgency there. So I agree. Like Winnipeg's down for the count. Let's go for blood right now. Let's get as much, separation as you can. But yeah, I would love to see them not play down to Hamilton going in. The late game on Sunday should be exciting.
Taylor, can you kind of see that as well too? Like, are you completely sold on BC?
I wouldn't say I'm completely sold on BC. I mean, Saskatchewan has looked good through 3 weeks, but I do think, they probably are the team to beat. I mean, it has been Winnipeg these so many years, and BC was just the next team in line, and Vernon has looked pretty good this year for the most part. I think this probably is their year, but also, too, like, they're playing under a lot of pressure. When they were in Winnipeg 2 weeks ago, we were asking Vernon Adams, we were asking Rick Campbell, like, hey, like, people are expecting you guys to take that next step. I think everyone, or mostly everyone on that TSN panel, picked the Lions to be in the Grey Cup, and you're hosting it as well, so there's the more pressure with that. So I'm kind of curious to see how they can handle that pressure. I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, we're not thinking about that, and we're not listening to any of the outside noise. But I mean, that's just human nature. Like, how can that outside noise, how that pressure not kind of creep into the locker room a little bit? So it'll be interesting to see because, that is a ton of pressure. And that's something that Winnipeg will be facing next year, hosting the Grey Cup in 2025. A lot of people think this is just a rebuilding year. We're going to take a step back, lick our wounds a little bit, and then next year we'll maybe have some more free up some more money, and we'll be able to put together a better team. And these younger guys that we're relying on this year will have more experience next year. So, that's a lot of pressure to put on a team. So we'll see how it works out for BC.
AJ, do you kind of see what I'm saying with that, with about BC traveling east, that they have had their struggles?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that the other way too, going the other way to BC in those late starts. So that's always part and parcel of what you get in the Canadian Football League. Look, there's a reason why when you talk about the crossover, for example, no team has ever come and won 2 games in the East from the West in the playoffs. We still haven't seen a crossover team make the Grey Cup, and I think that's a big part of it as well. So, I think there's definitely something to that, especially in terms of just routines. Like if you have a 1 p.m. kickoff in the East and BC's playing, that's 10 a.m. Out West. So just the body clock thing, and teams aren't coming out 3 days early. Usually they're coming out a day early, and sometimes that's not enough to fully get through that. But the one thing I've noticed through the years, the good teams, the Winnipegs the last 4 years, the Calgarys before that, Ottawa when they had some really good teams from 2015 to 2018, they don't let those types of things bother them as much. So that's when you truly know you've got a top team, is when you win those games on a short week. You win those games that maybe the quirks in the schedule don't look in your favor, because that's what you get in the CFL, especially in the summer with these Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for television. You're going to get some weird schedules. You're going to get some weird times. You're not going to travel out 2-3 days before. So the real good teams find a way to win those, and some of the others maybe have some of those challenges.
Yeah, just to jump in super quick, it's like BC just doesn't have like that killer instinct all the time, right? Like we want, we're Kraken fans in the NHL, and like, we didn't have the greatest year, right? But you kind of, kind of squint your eyes and go, well, at the standings and maybe, and the Kraken can kind of get to a wild card. And then, having lived through the Stanley Cup playoffs and hearing like everything that Edmonton went through and like McDavid, his like whatever injuries, all this stuff they found, I'm like, the Kraken never would have won anything. Like we don't have any of that. Like we never would have made it anywhere near any of that. And so it's the same with BC. They don't always have that killer instinct that Winnipeg has to go in to get these games done that Montreal seems to have now. So I'll be curious, like I said, to see. But it's a weird disconnect there of like last year you heard they got high on their own supply and they were big on the Donut Boys and all that, and then they give up all these touchdowns and get run out of town. Like I don't know, they need to be consistent. I would like to see this and not have this be a fallback game, but there's something there, and I don't know if it's a coaching thing, if it's a locker room thing, but to me there's always been a disconnect there.
What's around the horn on this here, guys? Just Taylor, no chance of an upset with Calgary and Montreal?
I wouldn't say no chance. I mean, this is the CFL after all. I really think anyone could beat anyone on any given week. However, Montreal does look like the cream of the crop right now. And it's interesting, right? Last year we thought, oh, what a big upset. Montreal knocked off Toronto. What a big upset. Montreal knocked off Winnipeg. But I think really they just really kind of found their game at the perfect timing, and now it's carrying over to this year. So now kind of looking back at that playoff run, it doesn't really seem so shocking anymore. It's like, oh, no, actually they are a damn good team. So it'll be a tough test for Calgary, but you never know.
AJ, I know you've kind of anointed the Montreal as the best team in the league. They're not going 18-0 though. Maybe the Stamps do it this week?
Yeah, you don't want them to go. Like if you're a Montreal fan and you can look back at the 89 Edmonton Eskimos, you can look back at the 2016 Calgary Stampeders, you could look at Golden State Warriors that won 73 games, the Boston Bruins that set those records last season, the New England Patriots that went unbeaten. Yeah, you don't want to be that team because all the teams with the best records in the history of their league have not won the championship. So
the Argonauts.
Yeah, well, the Argonauts had that same issue last year as well, for sure. So, but I'm not picking against Montreal until they give me a reason to pick against them. They don't beat themselves. They remind me of those Calgary teams within the last decade. They don't beat themselves. They're not flashy. They got an awesome defense. Offensively, they've got a couple of big playmakers, certainly a couple of great Canadians in Philpott and Julian Grant. But, they're not a team that really scares you in terms of like this explosiveness. They're just really solid everywhere. They believe in themselves. They believe in their culture, and they don't beat themselves. So, yeah, I'm not picking against Montreal until they give me some reasons to pick against them.
Come on, Reid. I think you like to walk on the wild side. Will you join me with the Stamps?
So I am a Cody Fajardo stan, friend of the podcast. He had us blocked for a long time. We rekindled that. I even did a fake cameo where Cody Fajardo congratulated us about the Markcast. It's been the whole thing, Bubs. You really should check out the legacy here. But Cody throwing that touchdown pass in the Grey Cup last year, that whole drive, and we were there, incredible game. It's like all the care in the world, right, is off Cody's shoulders now. Like he is just a free man. He's got the monkey off his back. He bet on himself, left Regina, all that, got kicked out unceremoniously out of town, him and Jason Moss. And he's just playing like a new guy. He's seeing the field and the confidence. And we talk in our group chat all the time. We have all of our CFL writers and stuff in our little Twitter. And it's just I can't bet against him right now because Cody's just playing like a free spirit and he's really just locked in. And it's cool to see how different the world would be, right, if he doesn't connect on those passes last year and they don't have that game-winning drive. But now that they have, and it's changed his life and it's changed history and it's part of the legacy of all this. But I really think he's a new man now, and I think it's pretty exciting to see.
Well, folks, if you're new to the CFL this week, it's coming to you every week on the Ticats Audio Network. That is loaded with CFL and Tiger Cats related programming. Please hit that subscribe, thumbs up button. certainly drop us a 5-star rating. And of course, if you want something to say or you want me to ask our guests anything, please let us know through the comments section. Guys, you guys have been tremendous on this podcast. AJ, as always, if someone wants to scratch it up with you on social media, where can they find you?
At the Super AJ on X, and just trucking along, TSN 1200, the drive, and Let It Go Ottawa Redblacks. Should be a fun year on a lot of different accounts.
Yeah, the Senators as well, too. Certainly some changes. I think the doldrums could be over in the nation's capital in the National Hockey League.
Hope so. It's been too long. 7-year drought. Yeah, we haven't had a playoff game between the Sens and Redblacks since, again, that 2018 East Final in November of 2018. So it feels like we need some playoffs here on a couple of different fronts.
Taylor, where can we find you?
You can find me at Taylor Allen 31 on X, and of course, you can find my work and my colleague Jeff Hamilton's work on the Winnipeg Free Press website, and we're one of the very few, if not the only outlet that still travels for CFL games. We hit the road, so if you could support the Free Press, that'd be great to keep us on the road as well, because that's obviously important to have boots on the ground and strong journalism like that.
Yes, and as for media guys like myself and AJ and Reid as well too, cheers for Winnipeg on that, because that's in my opinion inexcusable for some markets. That's all I'll say on that. Reid, fantastic rookie debut. Love your opinions, love your takes. Markcast, it's hitting. So where can we find you?
Yeah, everything's at themarkcast.com. We just posted about an hour-long discussion. Oliver Luck, former XFL commissioner back in 2020, and obviously a prolific football person in that regard, talking everything spring football. A lot of CFL connections there as well with what the future of that will look like with the Canadian League and the UFL and everything else in America. So good there. We have themarkcast.com and everything over on X and stuff as well.
What's Johnny Manziel up to these days?
Weird. See, like you always get that. It's like, oh, let's bring back him. Let's bring back Cap. Let's bring back all these, like, you know, we got a whole new. We got the Shea Pattersons of the world now. I mean, not anymore, but we did. Like, we don't need Johnny Manziel. I got Shea on my side. And
just quickly, Cody Fajardo blocked you on Twitter.
He did, and then because 3 Down Nation had an article where he said chicken nuggets as opposed to swear words, and I tweeted about it, and he was on like a blind rage of blocking all the critical media back when he was in Regina. So we got blocked, and then like I said, we did the fake cameo, and that was really a joy. And then yes, he came on, and Cody, as he said, he's a friend of the show, and yes, he said that I can say that publicly. So.
Well, guys, tremendous podcast. Really appreciate your time and your opinions, your candor, and a little bit of controversy as well. Thank you so much, folks. This is the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Let's kick it off soon and again on the Ticats Audio Network.